The Locked On Podcast Network presents the College Sports Big 3 in 30. The three biggest stories in college sports. From our local experts at the Locked On Podcast Network. We bring you the real story. Why it matters, what's next, who wins the big game, and more, all in 30 minutes. The College Sports Big 3 in 30 starts now with the biggest story in college sports.
Nico Iamaleava silenced every doubter, every critic, with a performance for the ages against Penn State.
You are Locked On UCLA, your daily podcast on the UCLA Bruins.
Just about, 24 hours before the game, everything was down on the Bruins. Myself, everything. Nobody could have thought that this was coming. And then Nico, because everybody says Nico has been special. Even the CBS Sports article prior to the season, special. And then I sit here like, all right, his draft stock's fallen. Not even a single, just not even an individual effort could do something if he did something against Penn State to save and resurrect his NFL draft stock. Well, I was wrong and I was a little dumb. And Nico says, hey, this is the reason I am the 5-star. Putting the Bruins literally on his back, carrying them with his legs, 5 touchdowns accounted for, 3 on the ground, and 128 yards rushing. That doesn't include the yardage lost from the sacks. And overall, a 70% completion percentage. He had a performance that not even Joey Aguilar could have done to lead UCLA to victory. No quarterback, I think, in the country could have had a performance like this, where Nico was getting popped multiple times, trying to lean in for touchdowns. On the 2-point conversion, where he single-handedly raced around like you might see in a high school field on a Friday night in Southern California, found the guy wide open, and kept the Bruins in front. Because if the Bruins don't get that 2-point conversion, that's a 3-point game, and Penn State, all they need is a field goal or they're driving for the win late in that game before they got stopped on 4th down. And instead, Nico comes through with one of the best individual efforts I've ever seen from a quarterback. Just the ability to keep the play alive, to keep the ball out of harm's way. Hold on to the ball. Yes, he did drop it once, picked it back up. And every single time UCLA was 3rd and long, it just seemed like he's running. And I remember someone made the comparison that I think Kyle Whittingham, that Nico is Cam Newton-esque. Well, he pulled off his Superman, did the whole showcase, the sign in the front, and then boom. It was Nico's day. Like, clearly, yes, it was a great effort by the defense to get Penn State off the field. Some receivers made some plays. The O-line stepped up immensely. It was great coaching from top to bottom. Yes, you can include the onside kick in there too. But this was Nico's day. His moment to silence everybody. You could argue it's a Heisman-esque performance. Now, yes, it's not going to happen with UCLA starting 0-4, but that's the type of dominant performance that I'm not sure we've seen from any quarterback against a team as highly touted as Penn State. Now, Penn State may be a little injury prone with what they were losing at the linebacker room into this game or during this game, but that doesn't take away from what Nico's faced, all the criticism, myself included, everybody else, where you can go see the same amount of criticism, other shows, other places, national level. But here I am. Yeah, I'll take a mea culpa. That was my bad, not realizing Nico had a performance like that in him. Nobody thought UCLA could perform up to this level with a new offensive game plan implemented just days before this game against Penn State, who is not known to go up and just give up 5 straight drives of scores. UCLA, 5 drives in the first half. Touchdown, field goal, something ridiculous against the James Franklin-led team. That just doesn't happen. That just does not happen. It takes a special type of individual. Take all the criticism, all the hate from the Tennessee fans, all of he's probably his camp, quote unquote, working on the deals for where he might head in the offseason. But if there's just a small sliver that he could stick around and be the talented quarterback with a new coach, whether it is a Tim Skipper, we'll tease that in other episodes, or some other coach that's an offensive genius, pair him with a young, hotshot offensive coordinator, is that Jerry Neuheisel? That would get UCLA excited for 2026. There's certainly more to be developed for Nico, but that's what makes him such a young, exciting college quarterback, because he can go do something like this. I think Tennessee fans were waiting all the time for this. And it's even funnier that the time that the Tennessee fans had a bye week, they could have watched this and been like, this is going to be as bad as it gets. And instead, he rose to the occasion. Many times he was left on the turf, left down, trying to get up a little slowly from the Rose Bowl turf, and just responded every time. what was the number? I think, 2 cracked helmets against Ohio State in that playoff game where he got knocked down by everybody, including myself. Everybody talked about it. And yes, it wasn't the best of circumstances, and it's not the best of lights, whether it was his fault, his decision fully to make that transfer from Tennessee to UCLA. But he backed it up finally with this play in a Bruin legend-like moment. UCLA could go 1-11, and he could still do his individual best to keep UCLA in these games. But the fact that UCLA had a win of a lifetime against a Penn State team that has national championship aspirations, a CFP Final Four team a year ago, a team coming into the year that was top 2 in the country, off of, yes, a shocking loss at home to Oregon, but under no circumstances could there have been a performance like this that would have kept UCLA in this game, right? And instead, UCLA received, Nico goes out there and comes out and makes a play and makes another play to the tune of 3 scores on the ground, 8 yards per carry, and a run of over 50-plus yards when the game was still in the balance in the second half. And just did that over and over and over again. Reaching over, the ball's almost getting punched out of his hands. He's reaching over, getting the touchdown. 3rd and goal, 5 yards out, dives, weaves through 3 Penn State defenders, and finds his way in the end zone. And oh, by the way, one of the better throws, dropping it in the bucket in between 2 defenders to Quasi Gilmer, where I didn't even think we've seen a throw like that from Nico, hitting small windows that would impress the NFL scouts, where I think it was reported, close to 30 guys where they're scouting this game, certainly to see if Drew Aller's up to snuff, probably looking at the Penn State running backs, some of these defenders, some of these O-linemen for Penn State, and then, what's the name? Nico Iamaleava, the one that stands out, rises above everything to kind of restore his image a little bit. Now, it's going to take a lot. It really depends on how this season turns out, how the offseason turns out, because there's still the realistic possibility that as much as he will become a Bruin legend with this performance, he can go pony up. He can go get some more money elsewhere in the portal. This could have earned him an extra $1 million to $2 million in the portal. This is why he commanded that $4 million, or his camp, the idea that they went out to Tennessee. We want $4 million. We want more money. And then came out and said, that's why, with the team that clearly did not come into this game showcase any ability to protect or create the lanes and the openings for Nico to run through, or just enough time to make plays against teams that are way worse than Penn State. Yes, Penn State could be overrated for sure, but there's no way Penn State is any worse than any of the teams UCLA's placed, especially up front. And for all the hits that Nico has taken, came up and just said, yeah, no. The reason the Bruins were so successful on 3rd downs, some of which good play calls, execution by Nico, and just the will to win. I think I saw the quote on social media. I don't know if it was the LA Times or who wrote it specifically, but Nico came out and said something along the like of, if you want to leave, leave. And Nico hasn't been touted as that loud locker room leader. But if that's truth, if he's come out and said it, yeah, if you want to leave, leave. But otherwise stay here and build something in 2025, a team that has nothing to play for, which we thought could have been the case when the Bruins started 1-5 in 2024. If he's becoming that vocal leader, if he wants to embrace the Southern California fandom, spurn all the other potential offers in the offseason, say, I need another year of seasoning. And if he can become a true Bruin lifer for the 2 seasons he could stay, 3 seasons max at UCLA, him chest bumping his younger brother, that's what the vision was. Now, it came off to a very slow start, an absolutely slow start. Laughable. Yes, Joey Aguilar has certainly upgraded his situation. And despite this performance, yes, Nico probably would be in a better situation at Tennessee in that offense and putting up big numbers, because Tennessee has put up big numbers in every game they've played, basically, win or lose. But there's some type of performances that Aguilar couldn't have done. When it came up to the Georgia game, they lost that game. Now, yes, they blew the lead. They missed a field goal that was easily makeable at home. But when you're kind of going 1-11 sometimes, and Nico is running around like you do at recess as a quarterback with a pass rush or in flag football, and a dude just dominates like he did, that is just a remarkable performance. And that's why he's clearly the player of the game, just making everything happen. For all the awful headlines and all the stupid, horrendous things we could have said, everything said. Man, we applaud it to you, Nico. Hats off to your performance in this game. Legendary. It'll be one that we play over and over. You go back to the Rose Bowl highlights, you see that highlight, like, man, for all the crap we took, all that nonsense we had to listen to, whether it be from me or anybody else, they're going to play that highlight of him just racing down Penn State, 10-year anniversary. UCLA, one of the biggest upsets in Rose Bowl history. And you're going to see the Nico highlights. It's going to be like, yeah, we remember the nonsense we had to deal with losing to New Mexico and UNLV and Northwestern. And, man, we got that game.
The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for the weekend with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits how I like to bet in the moment. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in on the action live as it unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sunday. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
What a win. What a team. Early enrollee true freshman Malachi Toney has just been immortalized into the amazing history of the Miami versus Florida State rivalry.
You are Locked On Canes, your daily podcast on the Miami Hurricanes.
So let's talk about the top performers in a win. And I know it was like a tale of three quarters versus a tale of the final quarter. We will talk about all of it, but the most important thing, Miami dominated for the majority of that game, and they come away in a road victory. By the way, Miami wins the game by 6 points. Should have been a lot more. The game wasn't really that close. They still managed to cover the 4.5-point spread. So there is that. And I wanted to lead off with Malachi Toney because, folks, it's not lost on me just how impactful it is to have someone who just turned 18 years old a couple of weeks ago, someone who should still be in high school right now. Malachi Toney reclassified and left American Heritage a year early to be a Miami Hurricane right now. You're telling me a just turned 18-year-old playing in the first road game of his college career, playing at a ranked Florida State Seminoles, goes out there and dominates the game the way that Malachi Toney did. He is the most electric true freshman player in the entire country right now. America is taking notice, and if they weren't taking notice before last night, they're taking notice now. And when you think about, so many over the years, over the decades, right? Guys like Jeremy Shockey, Willis McGahee, Clinton Portis, Michael freaking Irvin, people who have really taken over, made big impactful plays in the Miami-Florida State rivalry and became immortalized in Hurricanes history because of that. Because this rivalry is so significant. You make plays, you win games in this rivalry, people never forget you. We'll never forget the name Darrell Langham because of that catch that he made from our friend of the show, Malik Rozier, in that 2017 game. We're never going to forget Malachi Toney. Now, Toney, for the next 3 years is going to give us, I'm sure, so many more memories for us never to forget this young man. But against Florida State, 7 catches, 107 yards, 2 touchdowns, and it could have been a lot more than that from Mally. He had another long touchdown catch that was overruled due to an illegal motion by one of his teammates, had nothing to do with Toney. And he also nearly, Malachi, hauled in a deep ball from Carson Beck on Miami's first drive that was really close. Wet kind of through his fingertips. He could have been closer to 200 yards and possibly 3 touchdowns on the day. And one of my favorite of the many really good social media posts last night was from Malachi Toney's mother, who pointed out that, according to her, it's no longer Tallahassee, it's now Malahassee. And her son, Malachi Toney, was one of the top graded Miami Hurricanes in that game, according to Pro Football Focus. And, folks, and we're going to talk about C.J. Daniels as well, who also was on the receiving end of 2 Carson Beck touchdowns in the game. You think about how well Miami recruited in the case of a guy like Malachi Toney, getting him into the University of Miami and getting him ready to play, start, and dominate as an early enrollee true freshman. You also think about the impact of Miami's transfer portal at the wide receiver position to have a guy like 6-year senior C.J. Daniels, who I think is now up to 5 touchdown catches on the year after grabbing 2 yesterday. He and Malachi Toney, an early enrollee true freshman, they're like 5 or 6 years apart. They have been the two most reliable targets for Beck so far in this season. And speaking of the true freshman impact, it wasn't just Malachi Toney. Bryce Fitzgerald, true freshman safety out of Miami Columbus. He grabbed his 3rd career interception in 5 games at the U. That was the first takeaway against little Tommy Castellanos. Bryce Fitzgerald grabs that interception on a 4th down play, returns the interception 43 yards, and then on the very next play, Miami runs that flea flicker, Carson Beck 44 yards to Malachi Toney for the touchdown. True freshman to true freshman, 2 consecutive plays. Goes to show you, hey, I know Mario is very into recruiting, if you guys aren't aware. Top high school players around the country. You see, if you come to Miami, you're going to have the opportunity to make an impact if you earn it. And if you work hard, you can make an impact in your first season the way guys like Bryce Fitzgerald and Malachi Toney are. We got to talk about Carson Beck. Without his poise and without the big-time throws he made, Miami maybe doesn't win that game. Carson Beck provided the professional veteran presence that we needed. 0 interceptions thrown. 0 turnover-worthy plays. We talked for the last 2 weeks when Miami's going on the road for the first time. And Doak Campbell Stadium is not a picnic to play. And although Miami does have an above 500 record at Doak, so the Hurricanes historically have dealt with that annoying war chant pretty well over the years, yesterday included, but it's not an easy place for an opposing quarterback to go. And Carson Beck pushed all the right buttons and didn't make any mistakes. That's what you get from a veteran like him who's played in Tuscaloosa. He's played in Austin, Texas. He's played in all the toughest road environments in the SEC and just played now in arguably the toughest road environment in the ACC. And Carson Beck goes 20 for 27, 241 passing yards, 4 touchdowns, completed 74% of his passes in that win. We mentioned the touchdown passes. 2 of them were thrown to Malachi Toney. 2 of them were thrown to C.J. Daniels. I like how Miami was able to exploit the mismatch of C.J. Daniels up against a specific Florida State corner who's probably the weak spot of their defense. Shannon Dawson did his homework. And when we talk about the defense, it's very clear that Corey Heatherman did his homework as well in that one. And listen, that performance yesterday by Carson, and it's another signature win for the Hurricanes. This is now the 3rd time this season Miami has beaten a ranked team. For all the people who bashed Miami's resume last year, they didn't beat anybody ranked last year. Hurricanes already have 3 wins against teams that were ranked at the time they played them. Miami also has a win against Florida, who was ranked at the start of the season. And Florida, by the way, they're trying to save Billy Napier's job. That's what they do up there in Gainesville. They got a big home win against Texas yesterday. So maybe that Miami win against the Gators is aging a little bit better than some people thought it would. Miami already has a resume, potentially the best resume in college football right now. And a game like that for Carson Beck can only help his Heisman campaign, because we fondly remember the quarterbacks who beat Florida State, and Carson Beck just did that. And okay, a big thing, when I talk about pick your poison, okay, Miami, or I should say FSU, they were prepared for Miami's rushing attack. Tony White's defense had some success limiting Miami on the ground. But if you take that away, Miami has an answer. Pick your poison. If Mark Fletcher isn't going to be able to gouge the opponent, Carson Beck is going to be hitting explosive passing plays to C.J. Daniels, Malachi Toney, and company. And then defensively, I give Corey Heatherman so much credit. I know it wasn't perfect, right? Miami gave up some plays in the opening Florida State drive. Florida State had a lot of success, too much success in the 4th quarter. We still come away with the dub, thank goodness. But outside of that opening drive by Florida State, I thought Miami was a little bit juiced up and maybe overcommitting to some things. The Hurricanes were patient against all the gimmicks, all the misdirections, and the multiple flea flickers that came from that Gus Malzahn offense. I loved the play when Justin Scott snuffed out Mekhi Danzy in the backfield. Even though Scott didn't make the tackle, he slowed down the fastest Florida State Seminole and gave enough time to his teammates to swarm and stop that play for a loss of a couple yards. Those are the sorts of things, folks, you prepare 2 weeks for that because Miami had the bye week. You prepared 2 weeks on film to go up against all the nuances and all the trickeration of that Gus Malzahn offense, and Miami was very much ready for it. All right, when we come back, we'll talk about the top defensive performers. In fact, the top graded Miami Hurricane, it was a defensive player, but it's not the one you expect. It's not the guy who's been consistently, and who still played really well yesterday, by the way. It's not the guy who's consistently been the highest graded Hurricane all season long. We'll tell you who was the best Miami Hurricane on the field. You want to keep it locked right here, my friends. State champions for the second straight year.
The NFL season is here, and FanDuel is making sure you're ready for the weekend with a can't-miss offer. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. I love using FanDuel because it fits how I like to bet in the moment. Player props, building a same-game parlay, or even jumping in on the action live as it unfolds. It's quick, it's easy, and it's the best way to add a little more energy to Sundays. So are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet.
You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels.
Now, it's really interesting to think about where Ole Miss stands as a football program right now. And Ole Miss 2 years ago went all in on Deuce Knight, didn't get Deuce Knight. Deuce Knight ended up at Auburn, and Ole Miss is just waiting to see what happens on the plains to whether or not that recruitment is over. Now that the transfer portal is going from 9 windows essentially to 4 windows, it does make the transfer portal probably a little bit more valuable than high school recruiting. It's like one chance each and every game to do exactly whatever you need. So whatever. But Deuce Knight maybe comes available eventually. But Ole Miss is still doing some work in high school recruiting as well. And they got a big commitment on Sunday with potentially the top player in their entire recruiting class of 2027 with the commitment of Keegan Croucher, quarterback from the class of 2027. He is from Cheshire Academy, and I think it's either New York or Connecticut. He's up there somewhere. And Ole Miss beat out Oregon and Penn State for his services. They were talking about Keegan was going to head down to the Penn State-Indiana game to catch that. He might still go. But it's probably no coincidence that the top 2 teams that were on there that had a chance to close this out was Ole Miss and Penn State. Now, Oregon's on the periphery, and they're always going to be there because of Phil Knight and all of that stuff, okay? So it's not discounting Oregon. They're just not a big player at the moment, if that makes sense. But Ole Miss and Penn State coming through. He came down to Oxford for the Ole Miss LSU game. He got to see the crowd. He got to see Ole Miss dominate that game. Got to see Ole Miss take a D2 quarterback and completely take apart the best defense that they're going to see. He left that unbelievably impressed about what can happen. So then he cut on the TV to check out the Penn State Nittany Lions. They were playing against the 0-4 UCLA Bruins, and they got taken apart by the UCLA Bruins. Drew Aller, who is an all-world, all-combine quarterback for the Penn State Nittany Lions, struggled mightily all day long. A decent player, good player, but you just wonder about the development of somebody that has so many tools of what can happen. Keegan Crowder saw that. He sat back and looked at the Ole Miss game and said, hey, I want to go to Ole Miss. And I don't blame him there. And he is one of the better quarterbacks in the 2027 class. He's a 4-star in every single service, ranked 113 on Rivals, 151 on ESPN, not in the top 247 on 247 Sports, but good enough for a 4-star composite rating of 152, number 11th quarterback in the country, number 2 player in all of Connecticut. The one thing you notice about this player, he throws a really pretty ball. And he is athletic enough to do some of the dual threat stuff that the Ole Miss offense kind of requires. And you see that in this highlight that we have for Keegan Croucher. This is not really a highlight. It's just the highlights of the last game from a couple of days ago as well. But you'll be able to see him throw passes to where everything's coming out on time. He sees the field at a very advanced level and has the tools to be really good throwing the ball to the end zone. All of the stuff that you want in a quarterback, he can do. He is somebody that in 1985 would be a highly rated quarterback, just as much so as he is right now because of the arm talent. He can throw the ball all over the field. But like I said, he does have the mobility and the athleticism that they can do a little bit of the dual threat stuff as well. I would say put him in the same category of Austin Simmons and that type of running ability, and you would be pretty close to the ballpark of Keegan Croucher. Listen, this is important. This is a big deal for Ole Miss. Not necessarily. Everybody's going to say, well, what if he decommits? Okay, he does. We'll just pretend he doesn't exist and move on to the next one. But as it sits right now, while he is committed, that is every second that he is committed, he is recruiting for that university during that time. And Keegan Croucher is going to be able to land wide receivers. He's going to be able to make the guys that were at the LSU game. There was a 5-star out of Louisiana wide receiver. Maybe there's a relationship, a connection that was built by that. The whole recruiting class, if you want a big-time recruiting class, you want a quarterback first, because everybody that comes to your school wants to know that a quarterback is there, that they're going to be taken care of. Now, Ole Miss fans realize that as long as Lane Kiffin is there, you're never going to have to worry about quarterback. That's just the way that works. But the way it sits, having your quarterback means you can dig in on some of these offensive stars early, and you have a greater time to land them potentially. Listen, you have the signing day where everybody's going to talk about it. Ole Miss is in the middle of an unprecedented run that's going to help with that class. Potentially, you could have a playoff game pop up over the course of December or January. And then it comes to like junior days and combine season and all of that. And this is all going to have Keegan Croucher recruiting for your school, trying to find players that he connected with and get him to where he is going. That is not necessarily even the dirty little secret, but is something that every quarterback tries to do. Keegan Croucher is a big get for Ole Miss, and he's likely the number one player on the board. Not the number one quarterback on the board, the number one player on the board. And if you watch him throw, you can see exactly why.